Hello guys, this is Naruto-kun and we are back with our new fanfic, which is What If Naruto's Time Travel Romance with Mikoto in Her Youth Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and please subscribe to the channel. It motivates me to upload more fanfic like these for you all. Now let's start the fanfiction. Naruto was currently crouched behind the checking booth, observing his apparent support team. He had only gone to collect one of them, and the Sandaime said that he would surprise the blonde with the rest. He decided to reveal himself a little later so that he could be prepared in case there were any surprises on his team, which there was. Mikoto was easy enough to spot, since he had grabbed her for the mission just yesterday. His future father, Minato, was there as well, and he had to admit that he was completely blindsided by that addition. He thought that the other blonde would have been tapped for more important missions than this. His mother was there as well, but she didn't seem to be part of their team, as she had no backpack or gear that he could see on or near her, so she was likely just saying goodbye. The other member that caught him completely unawares was Hatake Kakashi. The silver hair was a dead giveaway, but the boy couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. The teammates he had heard about, Rin and Obito, were nowhere to be seen, so their team likely hadn't been formed yet. He didn't know why the Hokage put a Chunin on the team, but perhaps Tsukumo wanted Kakashi to get to know him now. He'd have to ask when he got back. There was another male present that he didn't know, but likely an Akimichi based on his stature. He would find out soon enough, though, as he listened in on their conversation. Packed enough. You really need to pack more than a few ration bars and spare kunai. That was his mother, likely berating his father on what seemed to be bad packing habits. Now he knew which side of the family he inherited that from. To have our old team back together. I thought stuff like this was pretty rare. Do you have any idea? That was the larger male, talking to Mikoto. Apparently he had been on a team with her before, and since most genin teams had 3 members and a sensei, that means Minato would be the third person of their team. What was the Sandaime thinking? Any later, I'm going to report it to the Sandaime. We were supposed to have left 15 minutes ago. Crap. That was Mikoto. Perhaps trying to be late on purpose wasn't such a good idea. How did Kakashi manage to get away with it so often in the future? Entering a shunshin, he moved quickly to the top of the nearest building, then down into the alleyway where it connected to the main street leading to the exit. Speeding up into a jog as he rounded the corner, he noticed as Minato spotted him, then nudged Mikoto and pointed in his direction. If the scowl on Mikoto's face was any indication, he was in for it. Unfortunately, he didn't think to come up with an adequate excuse. Perhaps he'd just have to borrow one from the future. Sure enough, it was Mikoto who opened fire with a, "You're late." As soon as he was within earshot, Naruto simply offered her a small smile, immediately thinking back to the days of his own genin team, so he couldn't resist waving his hand and nonchalantly explaining his reason. Sorry about that, a black cat crossed my path, so I had to take the long way around. The person Naruto believed was an Akimichi promptly barked out a laugh, and Kushina had mirth in her eyes as she held her hand up to her mouth, evidently to cover the smile on her face. Minato was smiling openly, while Kakashi simply rolled his eyes. Mikoto, on the other hand, she looked like she wanted to cut his head off, right then and there. Naruto knew he had to nip this potential issue in the bud before it became a problem later. While it was true that they were little more than acquaintances, he didn't want to give her a totally wrong impression of himself. She had opened her mouth to start talking again, but Naruto spoke up first, cutting her off. First of all, I'm sorry for being late, but at the same time it was a bit of a test. It's been a while since I've had to lead a small team, and I don't know any of you that well. This was just so I could see what your personalities were like. I was here 5 minutes before Kakashi arrived, observing you all. Mikoto and Minato seemed shocked to hear that, exactly why, he wasn't sure. Even Kakashi seemed a bit startled. Aniki, how could you have been here all this time? I didn't sense you at all, and I've always been told that I'm pretty good at sensing chakra signatures. Naruto nodded at Kushina, and decided to show them. Give me just a second, and you'll see. You can all feel my presence now, correct? After getting nods from everyone, he closed his eyes and concentrated. Standing completely still and letting his breathing calm down, he focused on nature, and called its energy to him, and let it surround him like a warm blanket. It was just enough to coat him slightly, but not enough to give him his full range of sage powers. The startled gasp he heard made him open his eyes, and he focused on Kushina, who seemed to be staring at him with more shock than any of the others. You disappeared. I can see you standing right in front of me, but your chakra is gone. That should be impossible. I can even sense the small amounts of chakra that civilians have, but I can't even get that. It's like you're invisible. Naruto nodded slowly. I have a way of masking my chakra and making myself completely invisible. That's one of the reasons why Hokage-sama used me for some of his hardest missions, because I couldn't be detected. That was a complete lie, of course, but they didn't know that. Unless he told any of them the truth, they never would know either. So now that I'm here, we'll hit the road. Hokage-sama tells me that you guys are going to be my backup and support in case anything goes wrong. That means you'll just be on standby, so if all goes well, you may not even need to see any action at all. First, however, Naruto turned his head to look at the person who he believed was an Akamichi. I don't know who you are. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, he stated, offering his hand. The other young man gave him a smile and a quick nod, meeting him for the handshake. Akamichi Taichi. It's nice to meet you, Uzumaki-san. I didn't realize there were any Uzumaki in the village other than Kushina-san. Naruto grinned. No one else did either until the other day. I have been a very well-kept secret, but with another war potentially looming on the horizon, Hokage-sama can't afford to keep me hidden anymore. That's part of the reason why I'm leading this mission. I'll explain our objectives as we get moving. Everyone, say your goodbyes to Kushina-san, because we're moving out in 5. After the small chorus of affirmatives, Naruto watched with detached interest as Kushina made her rounds, saying goodbye to everyone. She gave Taichi a nod and rubbed Kakashi's head, which he didn't seem to mind, surprisingly, and gave Mikoto a big hug. Minato took a little longer as she pampered him as usual, though either his father was playing it cool or was used to her behavior, because he took it all in stride and kept a smile on his face the entire time. Thinking everyone was done, Naruto called for the group to head out, only to be stopped as his arm was grabbed. He was turned around, and pulled into a hug that caught him completely by surprise. So much surprise, in fact, that he went completely rigid. A small giggle caused him to look down slightly at a mane of red hair pressed against his chest. You know, you're supposed to hug back when a girl hugs you. You didn't seem to have this problem last time. Yeah, Naruto managed to stutter out before slowly wrapping his arms around Kushina's back in an awkward manner. This only caused Kushina to laugh again as she broke the impromptu hug, and stuck her tongue out at him. We're going to have to work on that when you get back, Aniki. Naruto simply offered a sad smile, and nervously scratched at the back of his neck. Yeah, I haven't exactly had much practice in showing or receiving stuff like that. I can probably count the number of times I've been hugged on both hands. Kushina seemed strangely crestfallen at that, but then seemed to get a gleam of determination in her eyes and shouted for him to just wait until he gets back. Not quite sure what to make of it, he offered her a simple nod, then stiffly walked towards the exit, his team following behind him. It looks like Kushina has found her next victim, Minato. I don't know, Taichi. She hasn't hit him yet, so maybe it will be different. At least Kushina Onisan didn't leave him in a bloody mess on the ground. She even hugged him first. What's up with that? I don't know, Kakashi. But judging from how stiff Naruto's back looks, I don't think he was expecting the hug he got. Naruto listened to them ramble on as they took to the trees, unsure if they were trying to goad him into speaking or warn him about what Kushina was capable of. Interestingly enough, Mikoto was completely quiet throughout the entire exchange, and Naruto wasn't too eager to look over his shoulder to see what expression was on her face after she looked like she wanted to kill him before. Uzumaki-san. Naruto turned his head slightly, acknowledging Mikoto's presence. They had set up camp for the night in the middle of the forest, since they all agreed that they were perhaps another day away from the eastern coast. Their mission was taking them to water country, and getting there would probably take about 4 days total. Shouldn't you be sleeping, Mikoto-san? We have an early start tomorrow. Naruto had volunteered for first watch, and Minato had volunteered for second. Each watch would be about 3.5 hours, so the rest of the team would get approximately 7 hours of sleep. They would alternate watch shifts each day. Naruto had left a clone in the camp, while he had moved to a nearby stream to meditate. I'm having a hard time sleeping. I admit that it upset me you left a single clone to guard the camp. What would you do if we were attacked? Naruto pivoted himself slightly so that he could look directly at the woman, his piercing blue eyes boring directly into hers. He mentally applauded her when she didn't flinch or look away, but met his challenge openly. In the future he had perfected his stare, making many people flinch and second-guess themselves. It wasn't something he liked to do, but during a war you learn the hard way that there is a certain discipline that must be maintained, lest everything fall apart around you. 3 things. First, we're still in the middle of fire country, so any attacks by anything or anyone other than a dumbass bandit group is highly unlikely. Second, my clones are shadow clones, so any time one of them is dispelled their memories come to me immediately. I could be back in camp in a few. You probably didn't notice that there were a few extra stones and logs around the camp. I made 8 clones, and 7 of them transformed into other objects. So in case anyone did try anything, they would be in for a nasty surprise. If Mikoto was in any way upset, angry, or emotionally changed by what he said, she did a marvelous job of hiding it. There was a slight shift in her eyes that he barely noticed in the darkness around them, but that was it. The woman simply nodded her head towards him and spoke in a low tone, I see. I apologize for distracting you during your watch, Uzumaki-san. I shall try to be more mindful of my surroundings in the future. That said, she promptly turned back around and headed back towards the camp. Naruto listened to her footsteps until they disappeared, and only then did he let the confusion show on his face. Was she always like this? Talk about hard to read. 5 days later, Naruto sighed as he dodged the bone projectiles, yet again wondering why he was even bothering with this mission. For the umpteenth time he had to remind himself that it was because it was what Sarutobi wanted. It was one of the missions that Tsukumo may have failed in the future that got him to kill himself, and he needed to prove he was trustworthy. Oh, he knew that Minato was on the team to observe him, and Mikoto probably was too. In fact, he wouldn't be surprised if that was the reason for their entire team being here. Kakashi was probably just added as a distraction, of sorts, even if he was a skilled distraction. Kakashi also referred to Minato as senpai, or san, and not as sensei, which again reminded Naruto that they likely didn't have the relationship yet that Naruto knew they had later on. Stay still, Konoha scum. Naruto snorted, then quickly formed a low-powered Rasengan in his hand and sped up close to the Kagaya clan member, pressing the spinning ball of chakra directly into the man's torso. From what little he remembered about fighting Kimimaro, their clan had a blood limit that allowed them to use bones in quite creative ways. It wasn't as hard to locate their clan as he thought it might be, since they had entered the Bloody Mist Civil War. Everyone without a bloodline knew exactly where to find them and they were perpetually on high alert. Of course, always being on alert would eventually tire them out and lead to their eventual demise. No matter how skilled one was, you couldn't win when you weren't well rested. The blonde recalled that Kimimaro was notoriously difficult to injure and even Gaara and Lee had a hard time killing him. Then there was also the fact that Orochimaru had likely been experimenting on him for a while. However, it must have been him alone that had a high tolerance to pain. Unlike Kimimaro, the person that Naruto hit with the Rasengan screamed and went flying, landing hard on his back several meters away. Several members of the clan ran over to him as the man laid on the ground, groaning and clutching his chest. "What did you do to Nobu? Are you here to kill us all?" Naruto turned to look at a woman who was standing nearby in a defensive posture, her eyes remaining on him even though they occasionally twitched towards her fallen clan member. She didn't have the two pale dots above and between her eyes like some of the other members and the Kimimaro from his future did, and she wasn't preparing to attack him with bones either. He guessed she was from outside the clan, but was now with them through marriage or other means. "I asked to talk to your leader and he attacked me. I heard the Kagaya clan was bloodthirsty, but this is a little ridiculous. We're in the middle of a civil war, in case you didn't know, since you're not from around here. Asking to see or speak to the leader of a bloodline clan when you aren't a member of one is tantamount to declaring war against the clan." Naruto sighed internally. Of all the stupid. I see. I apologize then. Can you relay the message that I'm here with an offer to the Kagaya clan to join Konoha as a full clan, with all the rights that entails, so long as you swear loyalty to our Hokage. There is a greater war on the horizon, and we would like to offer an easy way out of the civil war in Water Country. Fool, why would we want to leave one war only to enter another? Naruto looked to face another member of the clan, this time it was one who did have the pale reddish dots on his face. Because you'd have the entire Fire Country behind your back, not just other bloodline clans. Konoha is also home to plenty other strong clans, some even without bloodlines that can match the strength of those with. Another clan member snorted. No clan can be stronger than one with a bloodline. Naruto resisted the urge to slap his hand against his forehead. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, a member of the Uzumaki clan, or what is left of it. While many of us were experts at Fuinjutsu, our only talent in our blood was that of an extended lifespan. I'm sure you all know of us, and how our home was destroyed during the Second War. There were a few scattered nods, enough to the point where Naruto was comfortable continuing with his speech. Good. Then you know we are nothing special as warriors. However, I've lived in Konoha all my life, and one thing Konoha has is the will of fire. The will to believe in others as much as you believe in yourself, that protecting what you care about only makes you stronger. I want to protect my home from the coming war. Bring your 3 strongest warriors, and I will beat them, proving that what is in your blood does not make you strong, it's what is in your heart. Many of the members of the Kagaya clan looked amongst each other. Naruto noticed that quite a large group of them had gathered around to listen to him. One of the more elderly among them stepped forward, which caused a few of the other clan members to look at him in shock. Based on their expressions, this man must have been the leader of the clan. Young man, am I to assume that your Hokage has given you the authority to speak on his behalf? Naruto nodded, slowly reaching into a pouch on his vest and pulling out a small scroll. A few members of the Kagaya clan tensed in case he was going to pull a weapon, but none of them made any overt movements, to which he was grateful. He took a few steps forward and offered the scroll to the older man, palm facing up and open to show he was not hiding a weapon in his hands. The older man must have noticed this, as he nodded and gave Naruto a small smile before grabbing the rolled scroll and opening it. The blonde looked around the small compound as the man conferred with a few others as they read the scroll's contents. It wasn't much, really, possibly 1/5 of the size of the Uchiha district back in Konoha, but that meant the numbers of their clan was probably even with one of the smaller clans in Konoha, like the Aburame or Kurama clans. However, since they were in the middle of a civil war, it was also likely that this was a temporary hideout. Many clans in Konoha had their own secret compounds that they could visit or use in emergencies. Quite often they were simply left over from times before Konoha was formed. Uzumaki-san, how many days' travel did it take you to get here? Naruto focused his attention on the older man again before speaking. A little over 4 days, traveling at full speed with a small team. A small team? They let you come here alone? I'm stronger than my entire team combined if I was to go all out. I don't mean to brag, but it's true and I could prove it should it be necessary. My Hokage knows this. They were sent as support so I could get rest while they keep a small camp as a safe zone. Very well. The Kagaya elder rubbed at his chin as he eyed Naruto speculatively. How long until you arrive back in Konoha? My mission duration was set for 2 weeks. I will contact as many clans as I can before my time expires. Setting aside about 4 days for travel time, that gives me a little over 4 days to talk to as many clans as I can. So we aren't the only ones you are after. At least you're honest. I can appreciate that. Not many know the value of honesty these days. Naruto nodded and decided to toss another bit of information at them. Hokage-sama also says that if you still have the blood plague that infects your clan, he will recall Tsunade of the Densetsu no Sannin to try to find a cure. That particular comment got a few shocked gasps and exclamations from the small gathering. Apparently their little problem wasn't well known outside of the clan, or at least they didn't think it was. It didn't affect all of them, but it was crippling to those that it did. That was one of the larger reasons why their clan had died out by the time Naruto was growing up. The civil war whittled down their healthy members while the disease claimed the rest. We were already prepared to travel to Konoha. But that just offered more incentive. Please give your Hokage our thanks, and expect the Kagaya clan in about 1 month's time. Naruto smiled in relief. That was one clan down, and they actually accepted to boot. As he turned to leave, a vague memory tickled at the back of his mind. Was Kimimaro born yet? Perhaps when the clan arrived, he would have to investigate. He could almost hear Kyuubi ranting to him about the chaos theory now. Almost. Naruto traveled quickly through the willow trees of Water Country, heading back towards where his team should be waiting at the camp. He had just finished talking with the leading council of the Yuki clan, or what he kept thinking of as Haku's clan. He saw Haku's features in a few of the people there, men and women alike, but had no idea if the person who would become the boy's mother was there. At first, it caused him no small amount of regret that his actions may keep Haku from even being born. There was a chance that his mother may have already fled the clan. They themselves had claimed that some people had already left to try to hide what they were, to escape the fighting. At least Naruto thought it was Haku's mother that was part of the clan. It had been so long that he didn't really remember. Many of the clan seemed surprised that Naruto had even come to them, but not so much after the blonde claimed he owed it to a member of the Yuki clan to try, that he had a debt that he may never be able to fully repay, but this was a small start. Haku was the one who made him as strong as he was, after all. The blonde began to slow down as he felt more presences than he should have at his camp. That didn't bode well. Immediately making a clone, he had it stop and concentrate to prepare Sage Mode as he continued onwards. Hopefully it wouldn't be needed, but it was better to be safe than sorry. Using the purified Kyuubi's chakra would be a last resort, of course, mostly because he didn't know how long it would last, nor how quickly the chakra would regenerate without the Kyuubi's actual consciousness being in him. As he watched the clone sit down and begin to meditate, he pumped up his own chakra, letting it shine like a beacon so his team would know that he was coming. Minato's keen eyes noticed as both Mikoto and one of the mist shinobi in front of them suddenly went rigid. Kakashi must have felt something too, since he had turned his head slightly to look over his shoulder, behind them all. Focusing his own senses in the direction Kakashi was looking, it took him a moment longer to feel what they felt. Someone or something really, really strong was headed directly for them at quick speeds. Judging from the looks on the mist shinobi's faces, they weren't expecting anyone. I will ask again, what are you doing in water country? I can only give you the same answer, Minato sighed. We're here on a diplomatic mission. That's all I've been allowed to say. I bet they are trying to poach the ones with cursed blood, Yugura-sama. If we let them do that, they may use Konoha to regroup and attack us later. What? Minato stared incredulously at the mist shinobi who had spoken. We wouldn't do something like that. You mean poach, or attacking us? The other shinobi sneered at him. Minato was about to retort, but a look from Mikoto made him bite his tongue. She shot a pointed look towards the apparent leader of their forces, who was looking back into the trees behind them in the same general direction that Kakashi had been. The strangest thing was that the very young boy seemed to have the respect of the other Kiri shinobi, yet he had a look on his face that resembled something close to fear. I'm surprised to see you here, Yugura. Minato's head snapped around quickly upon hearing Naruto's voice, and at the same time wondered if that chakra presence he felt before was the other blonde. Not only that, but how did he know this Yugura? Was there something? Who are you? How do you know my name? Since it was the boy who spoke, that confirmed Yugura was his name. But now the exact same question was bouncing around in his head. How did Naruto know such a young boy? I know a lot about you, Yugura. Naruto hopped down from the branch he had been resting on, landing in front of the team, facing the mist group. Are you already acting under compulsion? How long has it been already since you last were truly yourself? Minato watched as the boy's face went through several strange facial contortions, his eyes seeming to light up and fade at various intervals. Why you? What are you saying to Yugura-sama? Take that back this instant. Yugura-sama is incredibly powerful and would crush you like a bug. Once we squash the bloodline rebels, he will be the next Mizukage. Naruto barely spared a glance at the shinobi who spoke, instead choosing to keep his focus on who he knew to be the one-time future Mizukage. Come on, Yugura, I know you're there. You don't want to fight, or even kill, you're very young and you've seen enough of that already to last a lifetime, because of both who and what you are. That comment caused the mist shinobi to fall into ready stances, and even Yugura looked rather shocked. Minato and the rest of the Leaf team, however, settled for looking on in apparent confusion. How do you know things about Yugura-sama? One of the shinobi, likely the senior one after Yugura himself, took a step forward, weapons ready. Naruto tossed him a casual glance. I know a lot of things. I know he doesn't want to fight, but has been compelled to do a lot of things that he doesn't want to. I'm asking him to be strong, and try to break through it. Yugura promptly lurched forward, groaning as he clutched at his head. A few of the shinobi moved to help him, but he waved it off, slowly lifting his head to stare at Naruto. He looked about ready to say something, but the shinobi who had been yelling before likely couldn't stand the impasse anymore, and launched himself at Naruto. Minato barely had time to react himself, and he heard Mikoto and Taichi shout out Naruto's name. No action was needed on their part, however, as Naruto merely moved his arm in a slashing motion. The mist shinobi appeared to trip and fall over nothing, then began screaming as his leg fell off just below his knee. Two of the shinobi nearest him moved to staunch the blood flow, while the others were looking unsure about it being a good idea to attack Naruto like their comrade. If you get him to a healer soon, he can probably have his lower leg reattached and still use it. It's a clean cut. I'm not here to fight you or your shinobi, Yugura. The young boy appeared conflicted for several seconds before his eyes cleared and he began barking out orders. I need some people to carry him. We're returning to the village. With a glance at Naruto, he inquired, I trust you will be out of water country by nightfall. You have my word. Very well. It was interesting to meet you. I still don't know your name. Naruto. Yugura nodded slowly. You know more about me than most others, it seems. Strange, because I don't remember you at all. Perhaps you can answer my questions some other time, once I'm. Whatever Yugura was going to say was cut off as he clutched at his forehead again. The next time he opened his eyes, they were dull and unfocused again. Without a word, he turned around and left the area, the mist shinobi following him and carrying their wounded and moaning comrade with them. Once they could no longer hear the movement of the shinobi through the trees, Naruto turned around and offered his team a small smile. Everyone okay? Sorry I was gone for so long. They all looked among each other and shrugged before Taichi spoke. I think we were more ready to die of boredom before anything else. Though that was a tricky situation with that. Yugura, thanks for showing up when you did. No problem. What was he doing here anyway? Minato shook his head. I have no idea. He didn't believe me either when I said we were here for diplomatic reasons, and that we didn't want to fight. He had just asked us for the third time right before you showed up. I see. I guess it's good I showed up when I did, then. I would have been back sooner, but talking with the Yuki clan took longer than I expected. Did you manage to talk to everyone you planned on? Naruto nodded at Minato. 6 bloodline clans. Mikoto looked shocked at this revelation, as did Taichi. Kakashi seemed nonplussed, but was staring at Naruto with rapt attention. Minato was surprised as well. Not just at the fact that Naruto had talked to 6 clans about coming to Konoha, but that he had made it back alive after talking to them. We have until tonight, right? Did you want us to come with you to visit the Kagaya? Oh, I talked to them first. Now Minato was speechless. Everyone knew how bloodthirsty that clan's reputation was, and the fact that Naruto went there and talked to them alone. Minato didn't know if Naruto was brilliant, brave, strong, or incredibly stupid. Or some strange mix of all four. The fact that the other blonde was here with them now and seemed to be very nonchalant about the entire thing spoke volumes in his favor, however. Strangely though, things seemed to be going almost too well. Naruto took all of their incredulous stares in stride, and gave Minato a tight smile. We should probably get out of here tonight. I don't want to test Yagura. We'll be heading back a couple days early, but our objectives have been met for the most part. There were a few clans I didn't get to talk to yet, but maybe we'll get lucky and word will travel between them all. I only got confirmation from the Kagaya that they would come, but the others are going to wait and see. You managed to get the Kagaya clan. Are they really not as bloodthirsty as I've heard? Mikoto was shaking her head, obviously not believing what Naruto was saying. No, they are. I just promised them something they really wanted to hear. What? Naruto shook his head, offering Mikoto a smile along with an apology. I can't say. Hokage-sama's orders. He may tell you if you ask. Mikoto crossed her arms over her chest and frowned, only for Taichi to chuckle and give her a gentle pat on the shoulder. Before anyone could say anything else about the matter, Naruto turned away from the group and went still for a moment. Naruto. Minato stared curiously at Naruto's back. Is something wrong? The other blonde slowly shook his head. No, I just made a clone and used it to store up natural energy in case I needed to use it. I didn't, so I'm just dispelling that energy now. Natural energy. Those were the first words that Kakashi had spoken this entire time, which surprised everyone. One thing that was generally known about Kakashi, he wasn't the type who usually took an active interest in the abilities of others. Something about Naruto must have made the silver-haired boy curious. Yeah, Naruto turned around, and Minato noticed that there was an orange-colored pigmentation around his eyes that was slowly fading away. I can use the energy of nature to augment my own abilities. It comes in handy sometimes. Now Minato was curious too. Can anyone do it? No, you need to have a certain amount of chakra. Ask Ero Sennin, I'm sure he could tell you. Minato's head tilted slightly to the side. Ero, Senin. Naruto's eyes went wide for a second before he groaned and slapped his forehead. Oh, right. He'll probably kill me for saying that to someone else. I'm talking about Jiraiya. You know Jiraiya-sensei. Minato wanted to laugh about the Arrow Senin name, but Jiraiya wasn't really a hermit. He just traveled a lot. The other observation about him being perverted was spot on, though pretty much everyone knew about his habits. Yes, I know all of the Densetsu no Sanin. Minato opened his mouth to ask more, but Naruto silenced him with a wave of his hand. You can ask me all the questions you want when we get back to Fire County. I'll answer what I can. But for now, we should probably pack up and get moving. I don't feel like fighting one of the Mist's Jinchuriki if I can help it. There were some shocked squawks from the group, unbelieving that they had come close to fighting a Jinchuriki. Fortunately, though, it didn't take much more prodding for everyone to agree to begin packing, though that didn't stop Mikoto and Minato from glancing at Naruto from time to time. There was definitely more to him than met the eye, that was for certain. When they were about an hour from the nearest port village, Naruto stopped in his tracks and cursed, causing the rest of the group to stop and stare at him curiously. Have any of you ever fought a Biju before? The group all looked at each other, shaking their heads. All of their thoughts immediately went back to the comment Naruto made before they began leaving. Well, there's a first time for everything, I guess. Yugura is the Jinchuriki of the Sanbi. I hope you're ready, because he's hauling ass to get here. I guess he changed his mind about us leaving, or someone changed his mind for him. It was likely Toby. He probably somehow found out that Naruto knew a little too much about Yugura, and was going to send his pet Jinchuriki to kill the blonde. It was still too soon for Naruto to show any of his abilities, especially when the Madara clone could be watching. He'd just have to do his best to work with his team to subdue the Sanbi in any way possible. This is probably going to be a ninjutsu fight. Genjutsu won't work because I'm pretty sure there is one already active on him, and that is why he's attacking us now. Taijutsu is out of the question, you'll just get burnt. Naruto stared at Minato, who was giving him his rapt attention. Do you know any chakra suppression seals? Minato shook his head negatively. Not one that can suppress a Biju's chakra. Okay, I know one, but it's not that good and I need to concentrate. That means you guys need to keep him off balance using whatever you can. Before any of them could agree or disagree, Yugura came bursting through the trees, tearing across the ground directly at Naruto. The young boy had the deep red Biju cloak surrounding his body, like all Jinchuriki could do, and the three tails were streaming along behind him. Yugura took a swing at Naruto, and the blonde called up a little bit of the Kyuubi's chakra to coat his hand. Naruto caught the fist, and watched as Yugura's eyes opened in surprise. The blonde faked a wince to make it look like it hurt, then promptly backed off and formed a mud wall between them. As a shadow fell over Naruto, he looked up to see that Taichi had expanded as was typical of an Akamichi, and brought his fist down hard on the ground. It was on the other side of the wall so Naruto couldn't see what, if anything, had happened to Yugura. He seriously doubted Taichi would even give Yugura a scratch, but all he needed was a distraction. He got that distraction too, as he noticed Mikoto start up one of the renowned Uchiha techniques, the Phoenix Flower. A multitude of small, bird-shaped fiery projectiles were launched toward Yugura. As he mentally prepared himself to create the seal, he absently noticed his father was moving around near Mikoto too, starting up a technique of his own, but he didn't bother watching to see what it was. Taichi pulled back his hand right before there were several loud noises from the technique's impacting, but still held his hand with a wince. Biju chakra was not nice to exposed skin. He heard Kakashi's voice as the young teen prepped an attack as well, but tried to ignore it as he pulled out a blank sheet of chakra paper that he kept with himself for drawing seals. Naruto bit his finger, using his own blood as the ink, charging the symbols with his chakra as he drew. The only problem with using his own blood is that he often had to re-bite his fingertips several times, as it would heal right in the middle of drawing. For the most part he was able to keep his attention focused on drawing the seal, only having to dodge once as a rather large piece of debris headed his way. He would have to thank Taichi later for the heads up. When he finally finished the seal, he was pleased with himself for barely a moment before recognizing the telltale humming noise of the tailed beast ball being charged. Shit. Get out of the way. There is no way to stop that attack. Taichi was already behind Yagura, and looked to be ready to attack, only stopping when Naruto told them to get away. Not paying any further attention to the Akamichi, Naruto focused on who was in the path of the attack, only to see Kakashi and Mikoto there. They were too far to hear him, but Minato must have heard the original shout, as he was already moving towards them. Being closer to the raven-haired woman, he simply grabbed Mikoto and shouted towards Kakashi, then bodily hauled his old teammate away. That just left Kakashi, who was already turning to leave the blast area, but Naruto knew the area of effect for the menacing ball. The silver-haired kid wouldn't make it out of the blast radius in time. He didn't even know if Minato would make it in time either, but as he couldn't split his attention to watch, he could only hope so. Knowing what was needed to get Kakashi out of the way in time, Naruto felt for the Kyuubi's chakra still within him and pulled upon it, filtering it through his own will courtesy of the seal that was still present. His body lit up with a bright flash of yellow, and he immediately shot off faster than any watching eye could follow, becoming nothing more than a yellow blur. He was upon Kakashi in a second, scooping the young boy up in his arms and moving away in another, slightly slower flash. Naruto immediately dropped the technique as soon as they settled down behind a tree. Kakashi was staring at him in shock, only to let out a yelp as the little bit of forest near them suddenly erupted. The blonde braced himself and shielded Kakashi as best he could from all of the debris that the blast kicked up, pummeling his back and arms as he hovered over the other shinobi. When it all ended, he let out a grunt as he started climbing to his feet. Kakashi looked to still be in shock from what had just happened, so he grabbed the boy's shoulders and shook him slightly to try and gain his attention. He did focus on the blonde, if barely. I need to go place the seal on Yagura. I'll either be right back or send one of the others after you. Do you understand? Kakashi nodded his head somewhat absently. Naruto just hoped he was coherent enough to understand him. Not wasting any more time, the blonde moved swiftly through what remained of the nearby trees, maneuvering around them so that he could hopefully come up behind Yagura. The Jinchuriki was still sending out a ton of chakra, so it was impossible not to know his location. Once he got close enough, he spotted Yagura in what Killer Bee had called version 2, in which the Biju's chakra became closer to a second skin and not just a cloak. Yagura was currently sitting in the middle of the clearing, as if inspecting his handiwork, and looking around absently while growling. Realizing it was now or never, Naruto shot out from the nearest tree, running up behind the Jinchuriki. It didn't notice his footsteps until he was almost upon him, and tried to bring its tails around to swipe at him. Naruto managed to dodge the first two, but the third one clipped his leg and nearly sent him tumbling. The pain was immense, but it wasn't anything he wasn't already used to. Clearing his mind and trying to focus, Yagura roared right in his face, pulling his arm back to likely take a swipe at him, which helped to wake him up a bit more. His body felt like it was on autopilot, and he quickly sprung forward with his good leg, then reached up with his hand just fast enough to slap the seal he had made onto Yagura's forehead. The effects were nearly instantaneous. The Jinchuriki began to groan as his arm dropped back to his side and then the chakra gradually began to recede. In moments the vile chakra had completely disappeared, and a very much aware Yagura was left sitting there, wide-eyed and panting. What did you do to me? My mind, it's clear again. Naruto grunted, pulling a length of gauze out of one of his pouches and lifted up his pant leg, wincing at what he saw. The tail that hit him pierced him clean through, leaving a clean hole through his calf that was easily several centimeters in diameter. He could literally see the muscles and skin in his legs slowly knitting itself back together, both thanks to his heritage and the Kyuubi's chakra. He wrapped the gauze around his calf as he responded, "I know a thing or three about seals. I placed one on you that suppressed your biju. Apparently your biju controls you, and someone else is controlling your biju. I see. I feel tired. Because the biju's chakra is being suppressed in your system, when it normally travels through it freely. The closest example is that it's a mild form of chakra exhaustion. The seal's power will drain eventually, and you will return to normal." Yagura nodded, his eyes obviously drooping as he tried to stay awake. "Thank you, even if this moment is fleeting. You're welcome. Do what you can to fight the impulses. I have a feeling that if you don't, I'll probably never see you again. Not alive, at least. How do you know so?" Naruto knew what he was going to ask, but apparently the young boy could not keep himself awake any longer, and promptly fell over on his back, snoring. It was right at that moment that his team came running over. Naruto. He looked to his side, to see Kakashi and Taichi running up to him, while Minato was moving at a slower pace, holding Mikoto's arm and trying to keep her steady. The two of them looked a little worse for wear, so they might not have made it completely out of the blast radius in time. "Hey guys, is everyone okay?" They all murmured their affirmatives, even Kakashi. Most of them were staring at his gauze-wrapped leg, as if wondering just how bad that wound was. "Are you going to be able to travel? I saw that tail punch a hole in your leg." Minato winced as he nodded his head towards Naruto's leg, but the other blonde shrugged it off. "I'll be good to go in about an hour or so. Uzumaki have slightly advanced healing factors, as you may know." Minato's eyebrows raised up. "Really? I didn't know it was a clan trait, I just thought it was something random for Kushina." Naruto gave the other man a, "Do you really think that?" look, to which Minato pressed his lips into a straight line and shook his head. Hopefully the other blonde knew a thing or two about Kyuubi being quite the boost to the natural Uzumaki toughness. Heck, hopefully he just knew about the Kyuubi in general, by now. Judging by Naruto's comment and Minato's response, he probably did. With a grunt, Naruto pushed himself to his feet. "We should get moving as fast as we can. We'll leave Yagura here, he'll wake up in 15 minutes or so. I don't know what state of mind he'll be in either, but I'd rather not be around to find out." "Are you sure? Could we take him with us too?" Taichi began to ask what Naruto felt would be something obvious, but Minato cut him off before Naruto could say anything. "No, not a good idea. He's a Jinchuriki, and Kiri will go to war with us for killing or capturing him. We don't want to start the war early. We're not ready. Besides that, I don't know how strong the genjutsu on him is, it might be too risky to break." He did know that it was strong enough to be held by Toby for years, and if he could break it, he didn't want to come under even more scrutiny. Trying to lure away bloodline clans was enough. Naruto nodded in agreement, and that seemed to seal the deal for the rest of the team as no one commented further. Taichi and Kakashi both moved over to Naruto, each one moving one of the blonde's arms across their shoulders. The weight distribution was slightly awkward since the Akamichi was taller than he was, while Kakashi was a bit shorter, though he appreciated the gesture all the same. It wasn't really necessary, but he didn't want to turn away what was likely a symbol of trust and goodwill from his team. Now, he just had to think about how to explain his abilities to them and to the Hokage when he reported in. Hopefully Kakashi was the only one who saw his golden form, otherwise he'd probably be answering a lot more questions than he felt like. Maybe he'd get lucky and convince the kid that he was hallucinating because of the Biju's chakra. "Yeah, right. Come in." Naruto grabbed the handle and opened the door to the Hokage's office, quickly moving through and closing the door behind him. When he finally looked towards the Hokage, he stopped short, surprised to see who was standing in the room with him. Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade were all standing at attention, though giving him rather impassive looks. After a few seconds of staring between them, Naruto managed to find his voice. Sorry, I just got back and, never mind, I can always report in later, Hokage-sama. The Sandaime waved him off. Nonsense. I'm most curious to hear about your mission. I think my students would also be more likely to believe what I'm trying to explain to them if they heard about your capabilities directly from you. Naruto nodded and moved forward, consciously trying to avoid getting too close to the snake summoner. He had no idea if the man noticed, and didn't care either. The less he had to deal with the man now, the better. While Orochimaru wasn't the same man he was in the future, yet, he didn't know how far the man had already fallen. The few labs they had found so far could only attest that he ran experiments, but so far none of them were on people. I'd like to say the mission was a complete success. We had a little run-in with the Mist's Jinchuriki, however, so I'm not so sure if anything will come from that. Sarutobi's eyes narrowed, and all of the Sannin tensed. Explain. Naruto nodded again. As I was returning to our camp from meeting with the Yuki clan, I sensed some pretty large chakra signatures, including one that felt like a biju. I got to the camp as fast as I could, only to arrive in the middle of what seemed to be some sort of verbal diplomatic spar between Minato and Yagura, Mist's newest Jinchuriki. As the blonde went on to explain the rest of the encounter, including how he had talked the young Jinchuriki into leaving them alone as well as their encounter later, various expressions passed over the Sandaime's face, and some interesting gasps and grumbles came from the direction of the Sannin. It wasn't until the very end when he explained how he stopped a Jinchuriki that Jiraiya finally felt he had to talk. You mean to tell me you stopped a Jinchuriki with a suppression seal you wrote while on the battlefield? I realize I'm not a sealing expert, but I'd like to think I'm a fair hand at it. I don't think I've ever even heard of that before. Naruto shrugged, and tried to keep a straight face. Jiraiya was the one who used to use the seal on him in the future, after all. I'm no expert with seals, but this one should seem fairly obvious. It just takes a decent amount of chakra and concentration to prepare. I can show you how to make one, if you'd like. Jiraiya's face twitched for the briefest of moments before he grinned slightly. Sure, thanks. What about you, Orochimaru? This sort of thing sounds right up your alley. The snake summoner shook his head negatively. I prefer ninjutsu. Seals aren't my style. Naruto had to bite his tongue to keep from making any scathing comments, and was glad he did when the Hokage looked at him again. How did your main objective turn out, and what is the status of your team? My team is fine, no injuries to report. My left calf was speared by one of the Sanbi Jinchuriki's tails, but I have no trouble walking anymore, so I'm pretty sure it's healed by. What? Naruto stopped speaking, cut off suddenly by Tsunade, who was simply staring at him incredulously. You were speared by a biju's chakra and you aren't suffering from chakra poisoning. How? Naruto opened his mouth and closed it a few times, wondering how much to say. So he settled for, I'm sturdy. That didn't go over very well, as Tsunade literally threw him into a nearby chair and proceeded to unwrap the bloody bandage around his calf. He thought he heard a chuckle from Jiraiya, but it was quickly overshadowed by the gasp from Tsunade. How? I don't even see a scar. Her hand was glowing a light green as she inspected his calf. I'm an Uzumaki. Longevity and enhanced healing is our blood limit of sorts, you know. Tsunade looked at him sharply, and then at the Hokage, who slowly nodded. Even if you are an Uzumaki, the only one I know of who heals that fast is a result of special circumstances. I don't see how it's possible for you to not be affected by the chakra at all. Naruto couldn't do anything more than look innocent and shrug again. I don't know. It's been like this for as long as I can remember. Of course he knew why his abilities in that area were enhanced, Still, having Biju chakra in him now made him relatively immune. He was honestly surprised Tsunade didn't pick up on it, but then she was probably only doing a surface scan of his chakra and not the kind of stuff they did in the hospital. He considered sharing the secret for a moment before citing against it. The blonde was still being very careful about what he said in front of anyone else other than the Hokage, for now. Tsunade seemed to take his comments at face value at least, though she didn't look too happy about it. She gave him a critical eye as she rose to her feet, offering him a hand to help him stand as well. He took a moment to really look at her now, and noticed that she was older looking than he remembered, but her grip was just as strong. She apparently hadn't taken to permanently rejuvenating herself yet, as there were small lines on her face around her lips, and crow's feet in the corners of her eyes. Unlike the youth she tried to emulate in his time, right now she radiated a sort of mature beauty that he could easily appreciate. Other than that, she looked mostly the same from what he remembered. It took all his willpower not to engulf her in a hug, but a quick mental check reminded him that she likely wouldn't appreciate it right now. He thought he was looking discreetly, but he forgot who he was dealing with. He saw her eyes narrow, and he quickly murmured his thanks and looked away, back towards the Hokage. If she was going to say anything, she decided not to, and moved back over to her teammates. Sensei, if you don't need us any longer, I have some research to do, and I'm certain that Tsunade would like to visit Shizune. Not to mention that I would bet Jiraiya-kun has some research to do. Naruto was honestly surprised by the tone of voice Orochimaru used. He actually sounded amused when he mentioned Jiraiya's research. Was this what a normal Orochimaru was like before he went crazy? Very well. I need to finish up with Naruto too, and then get back to my own work. Dismissed. His three students all nodded, and then Jiraiya and Orochimaru offered him nods as well before they turned and walked for the door. Tsunade simply stared at him for a moment before her lips formed a tight smile and she shook her head, following her teammates. Once the door closed behind them, Naruto once again turned to face the Hokage, and continued with his report. I only got confirmation from the Kagaya clan that they would come join, and I promised them that Ba-chan would take a look at their blood to see if she could find out what the disease was that was killing them. Hiruzen leaned back in his seat. The Kagaya. So they went for it. Interesting. I've heard that they are a rather bloodthirsty clan, however. That's only partially true. I had to fight one of their members because they didn't believe me at first, but after they were willing to listen, we discussed things normally. I think whatever the disease in their blood is also makes them act somewhat irrationally, if only because they're frustrated with their looming death. Sarutobi rubbed at the stubble on his chin. Very well. But you will be the one to inform Tsunade about what needs to be done. When will they be here? Soon. Likely within the month. Alright. What about any other clans? I didn't get any promises out of them, other than that they'd think about it. Once word gets out about where the Kagaya have gone though, some others may follow. The civil war there is still in its infancy and many of the bloodline clans have fled from the village itself to their old clan grounds, so the non-bloodline faction will have a hard time keeping them all in water country should they try to leave. Hiruzen nodded slowly, propping his elbows on his desk and pressing his fingertips together. I guess I'll have to prepare some of our empty districts for any new arrivals. If we get a lot, we may need to modify the walls. Quote. Naruto's eyes went wide. He had never even considered the space issue. They may start needing to build homes outside the walls. His thoughts were quickly interrupted by a chuckle from the Hokage. Well, at least things will be getting interesting, it seems. Other than the skirmishes we've been watching, things have been fairly slow as of late. Normally I wouldn't care, but it seems the paperwork load has been increasing too. It was Naruto's turn to grin and chuckle, but Sarutobi just smiled and shook his head. If that's all, you're dismissed. Oh, and I know you're from the future, but I wouldn't suggest calling Tsunade Ba-chan, To her face if you want to keep your head on your shoulders. The blonde gulped and nodded as he turned towards the door. I also need to talk to you some more about Orochimaru. The Hokage frowned slightly. Yes, I remember. Stop by tomorrow, we'll discuss him then. Mikoto sighed deeply as she let her head rest back against the stone behind her in the hot spring. The warm water worked wonders when it came to relieving stress, and that was something she had plenty of lately. It had been a while since she actually had some free time, both from doing missions and from clan responsibilities, so she was going to make the most of it, and the hot spring was her first stop. Luckily, it was actually rather quiet here today, unlike the last few times she had been. There were only 4 other women in the area, and they must have all arrived together since they were chatting amongst themselves near one of the corners. She had her back to the stone she was leaning against, which was near the outside wall just in case Sensei was in town. She had never been a victim, but she had heard the stories. There was another small splash near the entrance, and Mikoto looked over to see Kushina finally enter the area. She had dragged the younger woman along with her, first and foremost because she was her best friend, but also because she just knew the redhead likely had tons of questions about their mission. Minato had been busy since they got back yesterday trying to work on some kind of technique that he had been testing little by little over the past year or so. Apparently during their mission he came across something that he believed would further help him with the technique. She honestly had no idea what it was he was working on. Kushina may have a better idea, but even she often just shook her head and shrugged whenever she was asked. Mikoto, why are you all the way over there? Kushina began to groan as she pushed her way through the warm water, a white towel wrapped around her torso. Mikoto noticed as the other women stopped talking to look over, then quickly went back to gossip as they noticed the bloody habanero. I usually come over here so my back is to the outside wall. Just in case Sensei is in town. Kushina made an face, then nodded and scooted over next to Mikoto so their arms barely touched, settling with her back to the rock as well. So. The older woman tilted her head slightly and raised an eyebrow as she waited for Kushina to continue. When she didn't, she continued the question, so, what? The redhead giggled, then looked at her friend with a grin. You already know what I want to know. How was the mission? I can't get anything out of Minato-kun, he's so focused on his new jutsu again. Mikoto slowly shrugged, resting her head back against the large stone once again. For the first few days it was incredibly boring. Just sitting in camp doing nothing. On the last day, the Mist's newest Jinchuriki showed up with an escort. He looked like a little kid, but he had so much power. Kushina gasped, wide-eyed, isn't he one of the faction leaders of the Bloody Mist? He's the one that started the civil war going on there, right? Is he really that young? The raven-haired woman shrugged. I don't know the details, but from what I heard while there that sounds about right. He didn't seem to believe us when we said we were there on a diplomatic mission of sorts, but finally did when Naruto-san arrived and managed to convince him. Kushina's eyes lit up a bit at the mention of Naruto. She had likely been waiting to hear information about her relative. How did Naruto Aniki do? Mikoto leaned her head back against the rock and sighed as she closed her eyes, letting out a bitter chuckle. He saved our lives. There was silence for a moment before Kushina caught Mikoto's arm in a death grip. What? You and the others almost died. Mikoto winced at the grip on her arm, but tried not to pay it too much mind. The redhead always did tend to be a clingy person when those she cared about were threatened, probably as a result of losing her clan in Uzushio. The Jinchuriki, Yugura, apparently changed his mind and chased us down not too long after we left. Naruto-san asked us to keep him distracted while he drew up a seal. Just as he was about to use the seal he had made, the boy launched a huge attack at us, and I wasn't able to get out of the way in time. At least not without Minato's help. Mikoto let her head hang forward slightly, Her loose, damp hair hiding most of the expression on her face, Naruto-san somehow managed to shout a warning in time. I wasn't really paying attention after hearing that as I tried to get away, but when Minato grabbed me I was at a good angle to see Naruto-san. He was near Kakashi-kun and looked to be glowing, though I was moving too quickly to really notice. However, 1 second I thought he was there, and the next both he and Kakashi-kun were gone. She let out a sigh as she finished. I didn't think about it too much before now. Minato and I got caught in the edge of the blast from Yagura's attack, and we were more worried about getting home without any further attacks against us. I was probably just seeing things. Kushina had started going pale the moment Mikoto made mention of the Jinchuriki. It wasn't every day they were discussed, let alone encountered or even fought. Mikoto knew about Kushina and the Kyuubi, as did the rest of her team because Kushina told them. There were a few others that she believed knew about the Kyuubi as well, but it wasn't something that anyone really talked about. The large majority of Konoha was likely completely oblivious that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki was even in Konoha. Mikoto continued, anyway, after saving us, he went back to place a seal on Yagura. He got injured when he did it, but the seal worked, and the Biju's chakra went away, leaving only the boy there. Yagura passed out shortly after, and Naruto-san wrapped up his leg before we left. That's it. Naruto Aniki. He fought a Jinchuriki and won. Is he okay? Mikoto nodded, and let out another sigh. He made it back to Konoha with us and wasn't slowed down at all. Naruto had saved them all, and battled and won against another who was both a Jinchuriki and rumored to be the leader of the anti-bloodline faction. Who knew how strong he was? Heck, even if that's as strong as he really was, he could probably beat a lot of people. Even when injured he didn't complain once when Minato requested they set a grueling pace to return to Konoha. She absently began to wonder who would be stronger, Naruto or her fiancé, Fugaku. Mikoto, do you think I should tell him? Tell what? Kushina gave Mikoto an exasperated look. Tell Naruto Aniki that I'm the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Just in case, she explained. Mikoto stared at her best friend for a second before offering her best friend a rather somber grin. Naruto-san doesn't really strike me as the kind of person who would care if you are or aren't. He seemed to know that Yagura was a Jinchuriki, and at first managed to keep him from attacking us just by talking to him. Besides, if he knew that the mist had won, maybe the Hokage already told him you are. Maybe you're right. That means, hey, what are you doing, Ero Sennin? A voice that both women recognized was clear enough to make it over the fence, causing both of them to go rigid and look at each other in shock. Ero Sennin, I'm not AO, hey. Naruto, right, be quiet, or you'll alert the lovely ladies on the far side of the bath. Both girls visibly relaxed, realizing that they were fully hidden behind the rock and couldn't be seen. Doing the research I heard about, I take it. Yeah, what of it? Did you want some pointers? No thanks. I was just making sure that Kushina-chan and Mikoto-san weren't in there. I know better than to peep on those two. There was a brief period of cackling laughter from the other side of the fence before Jiraiya continued, "Boo it, you got a thing for both of them, Both girls were still staring at each other slack-jawed now as they continued listening to the barely audible conversation. Not really, no. Yes, they are both beautiful women, but they are both spoken for and I know better." Kushina immediately blushed crimson, hiding her face behind her hands. Mikoto, on the other hand, was completely rigid in total shock. She had been called pretty and attractive before, but she got the feeling it was more out of obligation than anything else. But not even Fugaku had ever called her beautiful. Sure, it was only a word, but it was a rare one for her to hear, and it was never applied to her. She realized that the standard Konoha Jonin attire wasn't exactly the most flattering clothing, and it is probably what kept other people from being more interested in her. Besides the fact that she was the Uchiha heir. Apparently it involuntarily made her rather intimidating, or so she'd heard from the few other friends she had. Well, aren't you charming? Oh, look but don't touch. Mindset, I see. I probably shouldn't even be looking. Even that makes me feel guilty as hell. Especially because Kushina-chan looks up to me like a brother. By this time Kushina had completely sunk into the water almost up to her ears. Mikoto, meanwhile, was straining hers to pick up every word. I know where you're coming from, Naruto. Both ladies could hear a loud sigh of exasperation from the other side. I know better than to peep on Kushina, because I value my manhood too much. Mikoto was on my genin team with Minato and Taichi, so that would just be wrong on so many levels if I peeped on her. Both women held their breath as they waited for the response, which wasn't long in coming. Good. I was just making sure. Anyway, I have to go find Ba-chan on Hokage-sama's orders, so just don't stick around long enough to get caught, Arrow Sennin. Ba-chan. And hey, I told you I'm not a whatever. Leave me alone. Right. See you. Mikoto still couldn't believe the conversation she had just overheard. Kushina was still as red as could be, and was obviously trying to compose herself. She was visibly startled when Mikoto made a move to stand up. Mikoto nay. The raven-haired woman tossed her friend a vicious grin. You can stay here, I think I should go have a nice chat with sensei about his habits. As Mikoto moved away from behind the rock, they all heard a loud yelp followed by a string of curses come from behind the wall, including the 4 other women who were in the other corner of the springs. The noise caused Kushina to smile, and she clenched her own towel around herself. Wait up. I think I'll join you in your talk with Arrow Sennin. Already a few rooftops away, Naruto suddenly felt like bursting into laughter. Naruto was woken from his slumber by a loud knocking on the door to his apartment. He had rented the place after making enough money from his missions over the last 2 months that he had been in the past. Things had been moving at a decent pace, though the war still hadn't happened yet. Trying to wake himself up as he scrambled for the door, there was yet another knock. He tried to shout that he was coming, but his mouth wasn't working properly yet and all that came out was a strangled noise before he coughed. The blonde opened the door to see a member of the Hokage's Anbu forces standing there. A woman, from her stature and build, with shoulder-length auburn hair. Her mask looked like it was supposed to resemble some sort of bird, but his mind was still in sleep mode so he didn't even bother trying to identify it. He had managed to recognize quite a few Anbu in the time he had been back, but this wasn't one that he could claim to remember. Uzumaki-sama, Hokage-sama requests your presence at your earliest convenience. Naruto covered his mouth, hiding a yawn before he nodded and gestured back into his apartment. All right, tell him I'll be there as soon as I get dressed and grab something to drink. Hi. The moment the word left the Anbu's mouth, she vanished in a shunshin. As Naruto closed his door and returned to his room, he tried wrapping his head around being called Uzumaki-sama, as anyone giving him that kind of respect was still new. He didn't try to dissuade it, but he didn't encourage it either. Even during his time in the future as the leader of the army, most people still just called him Naruto, because it was what he preferred. Most people he had fought beside and bled with on the battlefield, or they knew him as he grew up, or they had just simply earned the right. He wasn't one to bother with titles. Here, however, he was a bit of an outsider. Even after 2 months there were some who were skeptical of his claims of working exclusively for Sarutobi, but his new, public, mission record didn't lie. With already 4 successful S-ranked and 16 A-ranked missions under his belt, no one doubted his ability to get the job done. They just weren't comfortable with his random appearance. He didn't blame them, of course. Sarutobi's old teammates didn't trust him one bit either, until the 2 of them agreed that it would be best if those 2 knew Naruto was from the future. At first the blonde was skeptical about letting anyone else know, but then he remembered that Shimura Danzo already knew, and if he didn't trust anyone in Konoha, Danzo was always high on the list. However, the Danzo in the present had not fully become the Danzo that he heard the warnings about in the future yet. Most of that reason was probably because the man was still the current Anbu commander and route hadn't been formed yet, at least to the best of his knowledge. Once the two advisors, Homura and Kaharu, learned of Naruto's status, they inquired about telling the Sannin who he really was. Originally they felt that the Densetsu no Sannin were both trustworthy and skilled enough to be brought in the loop. Opinion quickly changed, however, when Naruto told Hiruzen a few more things about Orochimaru. As a result, the Hokage felt it would be best if any explanations were taken care of after they confronted his troublesome student, and not before. Naruto looked into his refrigerator and grabbed some juice, quickly chugging it down as he mentally prepared himself for whatever the Hokage could want. It probably had something to do with the new arrivals in Konoha, as had been the reason for most of his other summons over the last couple weeks. As the blonde left his apartment, he cast a glance over towards the southern wall, where some new buildings could barely be made out. He had been named as a sort of envoy for new arrivals into Konoha, as his mission to Water Country had been a smashing success beyond everyone's expectations. The Kagaya clan had been the first to arrive, as he knew they would be. It had only taken a week for the first members of the clan to arrive, and the Hokage had immediately started moving them into some of the newly renovated areas of Konoha. Much to everyone's surprise, however, other clans started streaming in faster than anyone expected. Since Naruto actually went and met with various clans, the news spread like wildfire. The Kagaya and Yuki clans had come, as well as the Terumi clan, which completely flabbergasted Naruto because he hadn't even talked with them. Apparently their clan had close ties with the Yuki, because both of them arrived at right around the same time. In total so far, 8 clans arrived in Konoha that used to call Kiri their home. While it might seem like a lot, Naruto knew that those clans' membership numbers, even when all added together, were still smaller than the total number of members in the entire Uchiha clan. Still, several impressive bloodlines decided to call Konoha home now, and as a result he had achieved nearly worship status with those who knew of his mission. Namely the Hokage, his advisors, and many members of Anbu. Now his long-term mission assignment was to find ways to keep the new arrivals happy and assist them in getting settled. So far the Kagaya clan was ecstatic since he had already kept his promise to them. Tsunade was more than happy to take a look at their bloodline to find out what the problem was, because she saw it as her newest challenge to overcome. Even a young Shizune seemed excited at the prospect. While he was proud of his accomplishment, another part of him was worried. As he jumped from rooftop to rooftop, he couldn't help but wonder, have I already changed too much to predict what will happen in the future? Ah, Naruto, thank you for coming on such short notice. I apologize for waking you, I know you were busy until late last night. While Naruto normally would have tossed a joke about what he was doing late last night, there were another 2 people in the room that he didn't know, nipping that idea in the bud. One of them was an older, probably middle-aged man with a rather severe look to him. His hair was a brownish red and was left hanging free to about shoulder level. The man gave Naruto a brief nod, to which the blonde returned, before he turned back to look at the other person with him. She was a younger girl, perhaps in her mid to late teens. Her hair was the same color as the man, meaning it was likely that they were related. Like her apparent relative, she also nodded at Naruto, but gave him a rather bright smile as well. She was gorgeous, and Naruto found himself trying not to blush. Hearing the Sandame's voice caused Naruto to focus on the older man once again. Naruto-kun, this is Kozo of the Terumi clan, along with his daughter, Mei. They're the latest arrival, and perhaps among the most powerful of all the clans that have arrived from Kiri. I need you to go around and gather the builders again. The rest of their clan will be arriving throughout the month, so we need to be prepared. Yes, Hokage-sama. Thank you. I have to talk to you about some other things as well, so please remain here for a moment. Kozo-san, is there anything else you will be needing? The other man shook his head and bent forward in a polite bow. All of our immediate needs have been seen to. You have been most gracious. You have our entire clan's gratitude, Hokage-sama. Very well. If anything else arises, either visit me or Naruto-kun there. He is acting as the main coordinator for the clans that are arriving from Kiri. I see. Thank you. As Kozo turned to walk towards the door, he offered Naruto another nod. Mei walked in the shadow of her relative, so he didn't see or hear anything further from her. The blonde closed his eyes and let his head lean forward slightly as he listened to their footsteps. It wasn't until the door to the Hokage's office opened and closed again that he opened his eyes and looked up at the Hokage once more. Was there something about the Terumi clan, Naruto-kun? You looked shocked when you heard their clan name. I never visited their clan, first of all, because of what I knew from the future. I already knew as soon as the Kagaya clan agreed to come that the future would change, but now with the Terumi clan. Naruto began to explain, before his voice trailed off. But why would the Terumi clan make things so different? The blonde let out a sigh. The girl who was here, Terumi Mei. She became the Godime Mizukage, though I don't know when. If I had to guess, it was probably sometime shortly after I became a teenager in my time, because it wasn't until then that we realized the Yondaime Mizukage was dead and the Sanbi was roaming free. Sarutobi rubbed his chin as he leaned back in his chair. So the Yondaime Mizukage remains in power for a while, then? I guess so. I'm trying to put it together myself, Naruto shrugged. I know that Yagura is nothing more than a puppet for Tobi, and if the Nadaime Mizukage passed away at the end of the Second War, that means Tobi is technically the Sandaime right now, though he won't be in the public eye for very long. My theory is that he has begun controlling Yagura before he steps down, and either he did it himself or he forced Yagura to incite the current civil war. Now, however, Tobi attempts to remain in the shadows while Yagura becomes more visible. In the next few years he will likely fake his death and have Yagura take up the Yondaime spot. The blonde turned his gaze to look outside before he continued. Mei probably kills Yagura at some point, ending the civil war and becoming the Godime Mizukage. As to how she defeats one of my kind, well, she has two bloodlines, and an affinity for three elements. Yes, Kozo mentioned that. Normally the Terumi clan only has one bloodline, but somehow Mei ended up with a third affinity and has two bloodline limits. She's only a novice with their abilities, from what he says. I'm not surprised, as someone with a newer bloodline would have to create their own new techniques anyway. Sarutobi spoke quietly, but his eyes betrayed his excitement of having someone in the village having a strong affinity for three elements. The only two I ever saw her use regularly were a lava attack, and another one that released a corrosive mist. That's probably all she really ever needed to use, now that I think about it. Hiruzen nodded, then waved at Naruto. I don't want to keep them waiting too long, you're dismissed. When you're done we can talk more about this and what it means for the future. Yes sir. Mikoto sighed as she pushed herself to sit up from her futon. After her strange, unintentional, eavesdropping session a few days ago at the hot spring, she just hadn't been able to sleep well. She saw his face, and the words kept running through her head over and over again. Beautiful girls, both attached. I know better. Even though she was 20 years old, part of her wanted to giggle like a schoolgirl. She had never been called beautiful before, at least not anywhere she was able to hear it said. Kushina always claimed she was jealous of her killer figure, but then again Kushina was really the only one that had ever seen her or close to it due to their hot springs visits. Other than that, her uniform was typically the only thing she ever wore, even on her dates with Fugaku. She let out an unladylike grunt as she moved up to her feet, deciding to go sit outside for a little while and enjoy the night air. Grabbing a robe from a nearby chair, she wrapped it around herself and then slid open the door to her room. Slowly padding down the hallway, she stifled a yawn as she headed towards the porch that was nearest her room. Why was this bugging her so much? It had been a couple days since she saw him last. Perhaps it was because she wanted to ask him if he really meant what he said. The young woman let out another sigh as she sat on one of the porches, leaning her back against the exterior wall of the house. The crisp night air wasn't what she considered cold at all, but it was still chilly enough to be strangely refreshing. Something wrong, little one? Mikoto began to crack a smile, but suppressed it and instead shot a mock glare at the man who had just walked around the corner and was heading her way. I'm not little anymore, father. We've been over this. Uchiha Kagami chuckled as he walked over to the bench with his slight limp. You'll always be my little one. Hemp. Fine. Just don't tell anyone else. Mikoto obediently moved towards the side of the bench, in order to give her father some room. He sat down slowly, keeping his legs stretched outward. He was injured at the end of the Second War. A rock had shattered his kneecap. It had been mostly repaired, and even Tsunade-sama had looked at it, claiming he should be happy that he could even still walk under his own power. So, what is bothering you? I noticed you have been rather distracted these past few days. Mikoto pursed her lips, not sure how much she wanted to explain. She was close with her father, or so she thought, but to talk with a man about it felt slightly embarrassing. At times like this, she wished her mother was still alive. I'm having second thoughts about the upcoming marriage. Oh, Mikoto didn't look at her father, but she could tell from the sound of his voice that he had turned to look at her. You've been engaged for nearly a year now. This is the first I've heard of any doubts. There is only a month until the wedding. I know, Mikoto ground out. Believe me, I know. I think about it every day. It's just that recently, some things have come up that have changed my opinions. I see. So you've found someone else then? Now Mikoto did turn to stare at her father in shock as he chuckled lightly. How did I know? Well, you've been talking about a unique young man who appeared out of nowhere a few months ago quite often. I don't even ask about him and usually I'll get a Kushina said Naruto did this today. Or you'll never believe what Naruto can do. When I ask you how your day was. How do you always manage to see right through me? Mikoto muttered. Kagami couldn't help but chuckle again. I would say it's another one of my Sharingan abilities, but we both know that's a lie. The simple answer would be that you're my daughter and I make a point to pay attention to what you say and do. I could go on extolling your virtues, but instead I'll settle with saying I'm proud of you and trust your judgment. If you want to call off the wedding because you want to pursue other ventures, do it. Mikoto's face morphed into shock, but what about the elder council? I thought they were pressuring for you to find me a husband since I was 15. If I called this off. Kagami held up a hand, and Mikoto's mouth snapped shut. The elder council is just that, a council of advisors who are past their prime and have nothing better to do than nag me. They can nag me all they want, but my daughter's happiness comes before theirs. If you don't believe you will be happy with Fugaku, then don't marry him. They will have to be mollified with the fact that you found someone else, and not someone that I chose for you. There is no law that says you have to choose someone from within the clan either. Kagami paused for barely a moment, though it may help if they agreed to take the Uchiha name, considering your position. Mikoto had to lift her hand to wipe the tears that were forming in the corners of her eyes. Thank you. I'll have to think on this some. Her father chuckled briefly, shaking his head. There is no need to thank me for something that should be automatic, but you're welcome all the same. There were several moments of comfortable silence between them, and Mikoto was enjoying listening to the crickets in their enclosed yard before her father spoke again, interrupting the silence. So, how is he? Father. Kagami barked out a few laughs before looking at his daughter. What? Considering the path our conversation has taken to get to this point, I can't be curious if he makes you happy. Mikoto tried to look at her father, but the blush on her face became so intense that she had to look away. His laughter at her expense wasn't helping either. There is nothing between myself and Uzumaki-san. Oh, so now is Uzumaki-san. I see. Normally when you mention him he is just Naruto when we're talking. Tell me, you don't think about him just because of that mission where he saved you and your team, do you? No. Mikoto had quickly turned around again, though this time it was with a glare. Kagami nodded at her with a passive expression, then turned his own head to look out over the yard. Good. Because if it was I'd tell you to find some other reason to like him. Mikoto nodded, but didn't reply. The silence stretched on again for over a minute before her father spoke up again. So what? So what is it about Naruto that you like, which is different from every other man you've ever been around? Mikoto looked down at her hands which were in her lap, and let out a small sigh. Before she could say anything, however, her father spoke again. I realize I'm not your mother, and this may be uncomfortable for you, but I know from experience that sometimes you just have to say what you're thinking to someone. From what I know of your friend Kushina, she probably does all the talking while you just listen. You're right, Mikoto chuckled, her lips curved into a small smile. Naruto is just a refreshing change from what I'm used to dealing with. For someone with so much apparent power and authority, he doesn't lord it over others and actually acts his age, which is actually just a few months older than me. He's mysterious, but will answer any question I've ever asked him as long as it isn't classified. He's kind, but knows when discipline is needed. Minato respects and trusts him, which is unusual because Minato never gives his respect and trust easily. He gets personal briefings from Hokage-sama. He brought over all these clans from Kiri just through diplomacy alone. She said something else, but it was mumbled and Kagami didn't hear it. What was that last thing? Mikoto began to wring her hands together before she repeated herself, louder this time. I said, he called me beautiful. Well, you are. The young woman shook her head, but gave her father a smile. It's different coming from you. I know you'd call me beautiful even if I was incredibly ugly, because I'm your daughter. True. I figured. Mikoto giggled for a second. I heard him say it when he was standing up to Jiraiya-sensei, who was peeking in the female side of the onsen again. He was what? I thought you said he promised never to do it when you were in there. When I tell Hiruzen about. Father. Mikoto set her hand on her father's, calming him down. To be fair, both myself and Kushina were hidden behind a large rock and couldn't be seen. When we moved out from behind it, he let out a yell and probably passed out, because we saw him on his back when we went to confront him about it. Kushina gave him a good beating, so I don't think Sensei will be peeking on any Konoha baths for a while. Kagami grunted, causing Mikoto to giggle again. Good. I still can't believe how he gets away with doing that in the first place. Anyway, what does this have to do with Naruto? He was the one who told Jiraiya-sensei to stop peeping, especially because Kushina and myself might be in there. Sensei started to change the subject about how he liked us. Naruto said that we were beautiful, but both attached, so he knew better than to do anything. So that's what got all this started. Mikoto shook her head. No, I thought he was interesting the very first time I met him. He was fighting against Minato in a spar, and Minato was testing his new Hiraishin, which no one else can fight against to the best of my knowledge. Only Naruto can right now. I would make a point to watch him from time to time, or ask Minato and Kushina about him. It wasn't until the mission to Kiri and he saved my life that I really started to notice. Ever since then, it's just continued growing. Now when I meet him I sometimes get lightheaded, or my heart starts beating a little faster. Mikoto moved her hand and placed it on her chest, over her heart. It's all new to me, because I've never had this happen with anyone else before. Not even Minato, and we've been friends since our genin days. What is Kushina's opinion of Naruto? Mikoto's face immediately soured. If Minato isn't around, she is all over him. It's easy to see she has some sort of crush on him from the way she acts and talks to him. She won't go too far because she still loves Minato, though. She is apparently satisfied with treating him as a big brother figure, at least. Does Naruto respond to her? Kagami inquired. Only a little bit. It's like he said when we overheard him, he knows we are attached and won't go too far. He'll return a hug after saying hello or goodbye, but I've seen him try to avoid holding her hand for too long when she's grabbed it. Sometimes I think Kushina is just testing him. I could ask her. If she is, so far I'd say he's passed with flying colors. Kagami grinned as he looked at his daughter. I think it says a lot that you're paying attention that carefully to him. Mikoto knew there was another blush on her face, but she kept looking down and didn't bother trying to hide it. Okay, I think I like him. I'm definitely interested. How long would it take to break off the marriage to Fugaku? If you're serious, well, since it's such short notice, it could be a problem. Especially if Fugaku doesn't agree to it. There will be a lot of hassle and arguing going on. Unless something extreme were to happen. Extreme. Kagami nodded as he stared at his daughter. Yes, something that would likely make Fugaku agree to break the contract. I'm sure there are a few things you can think of that would make him no longer want to be your husband. I know I can think of a few things, but it's not my place to say. Mikoto nodded and looked up towards the sky. Something extreme. Just how far was she willing to go? Well, she knew, but in order for it to work, she'd have to get to know Naruto very well, very quickly. If I may offer one bit of advice. Mikoto looked over at her father, and gave him a small nod. If you plan to do anything about Naruto, do it quickly. I can already see how much sway he has with Hiruzen and the Hokage's council. Bringing as many new clans here as he did has also given him a huge amount of political capital and goodwill. It won't be long before he starts getting offers to marry from other women, with the promises of alliances and power. Naruto isn't like that, Mikoto let out in a fierce whisper. After talking to him these past months, I know he cares nothing for power, and is perfectly content with what he does. Kagami smiled. I agree. From what I've seen of him, he is exactly as you say. However, that doesn't stop other women from trying. Or who knows, tomorrow he could encounter a random civilian woman that worked a stall in the nearby grocery market and become completely enamored with her in minutes. Mikoto couldn't stop the sad smile that appeared on her face. Thinking about mother. Yes, I never heard the end of it from your grandfather. I had a contract, much like your own. I didn't know that. I never had a reason to tell you. I've always tried to let you do your own thing, which is what your mother wanted, as she didn't agree with the marriage contracts either. That is why I didn't agree to set you up with one until you actually asked me to. I tried to find the man most suitable, but there honestly wasn't much to pick from. Mikoto nodded, as they had already had this part of the conversation several times before. Father, how did you get out of your contract? She couldn't help the chill that ran up her spine as her father showed her one of the most devious grins she'd ever seen on his face. Are you sure you want to know?